Welcome, everyone, to Fantasy Basketball Trends. My name is Braxton, and this is the show where I give my thoughts on some guys that I like and some guys that I don't like over the last week. The guys that I mentioned can be streamers, trade targets, or just guys to pick up and hold, while the guys I'm not liking can range anywhere from outright drops to someone you need to keep a close eye on. Got some guys on the docket for you this week. It's been a pretty eventful week, I would say, in the fantasy space. So let's just jump right into it. Number one on the week is going to be Danny Wolf. As I mentioned last week, there's a lot of room for upside on this Nets team on how many guys they want to get involved. Danny Wolf really hasn't played much at all this season, but over the last few games that he's played, he's entered the rotation and he's looked pretty good. There really hasn't been any defensive stats to speak of, I will say. He's recorded 1 steal and 2 blocks total over the last 6 games. But that's not why you're rostering him, right? You're rostering him for the threes, some assists from the center position, and kind of just that overall versatility out of that center spot. I know he only has power forward eligibility on Yahoo currently, but I would anticipate the center eligibility to follow. It'll be interesting to see if he can pull some minutes away from Noah Clowney. Clowney has struggled some nights and can't really do much besides shoot from a fantasy perspective. Wolf really has a much nicer fantasy skill set, so I'm kind of rooting for Wolf to eat more into Clowney. I also don't think Clowney is very good. I think he's been overperforming. But he can play next to Nick Claxton and Daron Sharp, Daron Sharp because of his spacing ability, right? The Nets are constantly messing with the lineups, and they're going to be terrible the rest of the season. So I'd assume Danny Wolf is going to play a pretty large role moving forward, especially in the season. If they rest Nick Claxton, if they rest Michael Porter Jr., if Cam Thomas gets rested, Cam Thomas, coming back in the lineup could affect some of the usage as well. But these guys probably aren't going to be playing a ton down the stretch, right? So that's prime taking for Danny Wolf. The field goal percentage hasn't been as bad, I guess, as it could be. 44%, which is not great from a big, but is fine considering kind of his shot profile and the three-point volume that he's taking. And you'll live with it because of those out-of-position assists that I know it's only 2 or 3 a game right now, but I would assume, anticipate more to follow based on his production in college. I think he's a great grab in dynasty leagues, just to see how well he performs over the next few weeks. He's only 4% rostered in Yahoo leagues, so I think he's a nice grab in redrafts as well, just to see, okay, what do we actually have here? And that's kind of where these pickups come from. On bad teams, somebody emerges as good. We just saw it with Ryan Nembhard. That's where these midseason pickups come from. So keep an eye on Danny Wolf. Grab him if you can use what he brings to the table. And yeah, all right. Moving on to the next player, it is going to be Goga Bitadze. I don't think Goga's really been talked enough considering the blocks that he's bringing in. He's had a nice floor, blocking at least 1 shot in almost every game that he plays, right? There's room for additional upside on nights where he gets going. Some nights he surpasses that 20-minute mark. And Jamal Mosley does not seem afraid to play him down the stretch of certain games. He is averaging the 1.3 blocks in the season. The rest of it is not great. 6 points, 5 boards, 1.5 assists, 0.7 steals is really nice. The non-existent turnovers, it's 0.6 on the season. That's pretty solid as well. And he's shooting 72% from the field as well as 79% from the line, albeit on low volume. He kind of fits that mold of the low-end floor big of Moussa Diabate and Ryan Kalkbrenner, what they've been doing this season. You can really count on them for some blocks, some rebounds, and some efficiency. Goga is ranked 129 on the season in 9 category, mostly because of those blocks and the low turnovers, but that still counts. I talk about the impact versus 9 category ranking a lot. I think the impact of those blocks and efficiency of Goga is enough to kind of justify that ranking, right? Let's look at, Franz Wagner just went down earlier this morning as of recording. Not sure how much that affects Goga, but it could a little, right? Maybe a couple extra rebounds bounce his way. Maybe there's a couple extra touches. The injury probably affects, guys more like Anthony Black, Desmond Bane, maybe Tristan Da Silva more than anyone else. But, he's doing back to Goga, he's doing all of this in just 17 minutes. If Wendell Carter Jr. goes down at any point, who knows what Goga looks like in a 28, 29-minute role this season, I guess. On this iteration, we saw him start a lot of games last year, but When Mo Wagner comes back, could muddy the waters a little bit. It seems, though, they might play Mo Wagner a little bit more at the 4, especially if Franz has a significant injury. But, we'll kind of worry about Mo when we get there. There hasn't really been many updates on him this season. Batadze, if you need those big man stats, again, he's someone that is probably available in your Dynasty League and kind of fits that mold of the under-talked about and under-recognized players that I just love talking about so much. So, all right. Next is going to be DeAnthony Melton. I know he's basically missed almost the entire last 2 seasons with injury. He had the back thing, he had the knee thing, but they played him 21 minutes in his return, which is really encouraging. I know Dre was banged up. I know Steph was banged up. Excuse me. And they have some weird guys going off right now, like Pat Spencer. But I think Melton is better than guys like Gary Payton and Seth Curry, who are also playing some decent minutes. Kerr went 13 deep, halfway into the second quarter, just a game or two ago. So he's really testing the waters with everyone on this team right now. When this team gets closer to healthy again, I think Melton is the one out of that group that is going to retain, maybe a 20-minute per night role. And, I guess Buddy Hield is another guy that's going off right now, but Buddy is directly benefiting from those absences, whereas I think Melton is someone who can kind of coexist next to Steph and Dre. He doesn't need the touches or the shots that Buddy needs to put up solid fantasy numbers. And then, Buddy has obviously struggled all season, so when this team gets healthier, kind of to my point, I think it's very possible that Buddy loses minutes to DeAnthony Melton. We all know his stats that Melton brings that elite steal rate. He's only 3% roster on Yahoo, but in his return, he took 11 shots in those 21 minutes, brought 2 steals and 1 blocks. I think, he probably won't play a single back-to-back all season. He's probably on the waiver wire in your Dynasty League, depending on depth. In 16-team and shallower, he's likely available. With him not playing those minutes, not playing a back-to-back all season, he probably doesn't grab hold of a huge role because of that perceived rest and perceived limitation on sitting those back-to-backs, right? But definitely someone who needs to be on your radar for streamers. And in a Dynasty League, if you got a deeper bench, especially in redrafts too, if you have a deeper bench, he's someone you can kind of wait and plug in on nights where he is going to be playing, or maybe the Warriors are down someone. If they lift his minutes later in the season, someone like Steph or Moody or Kuminga misses time, that could help Melton even more. And like I said, just someone I wanted to put on your radar. His return wasn't talked about enough, and it's so tough to find those steals and the blocks and the wire, like I just talked about with Goga. Especially in those deep leagues, which is why you kind of need to pounce on and be ahead of the pack on guys like Melton, right? You don't want to wait for him to pop off and for him to become a hot pickup, because by then it'll be too late. So, he can be just such a huge fantasy monster when he gets going, and he's just a fun player to own. Next, let's talk about Vit Krejci. He's really taking advantage of Trae Young being injured right now. On the season, he's ranked 176, which is obviously not great. But the last 2 weeks, he is a little bit better at 159. The field goal percentage isn't great. The free throw percentage isn't great. He's not getting the line much, though, but you're rostering him for those threes, some steals, and some assists out of the forward spot, which is not a lot of guys around his value level or ownership percentage are bringing, right? Jalen Johnson is soaking up all of the usage right now, but Krejci is still doing more than expected. Like a lot of guys we've talked about, both this episode and previous episodes, I don't think he's necessarily a league winner, although some of the guys in the previous episodes have turned into potential league winner types, Gillespie, Ryan Rollins. Not trying to toot my own horn here, but I feel like some of these guys, tracking these low-end floor guys and having them on your radar, when they start to, kind of trend up a little bit, because you're already aware of them and you have your eye on them, you could say, oh, he's performing a little bit more. I've got him on radar. Let me grab him, right? So as opposed to kind of waiting for those hot pickups to pop up whenever, it's too late at that point. That like I just mentioned with Melton. So Krejci is someone who has, and we saw this late season and late season last year, and also earlier parts of the season this year. Krejci is, must roster on some nights when the Hawks are missing guys, or he just gets going, or he gets on a 3-4 game heater. So, anyways, like I said, he's probably not a 10-team or a 12-team guy, but, he's someone you want to be aware of on nights that you need threes. Like I just said, when he gets hot, he can go off for 5 or 6 threes on a given night. He steals the ball, he can score, he can block a shot. He's shown the ability to do that. Doesn't really turn the ball over, and he has that wing, that utility skill set out of a wing that is difficult to find, especially in those really barren waiver wires. On our Patreon earlier this week, we on our Player of the Month series, we talked about Anthony Black transitioning from a ball-first point guard to a lanky, switchy wing. Krejci has kind of followed a similar path. He was drafted as a 6'7", 6'8", ball-dominant point guard by OKC in the second round. Towards ACL, played a few games. Looked great in those games, but, he's kind of totally played a few games for OKC, I should say. But then, kind of moving on from them, he's kind of totally reinvented himself as a wing, and he's now a legitimate NBA player on a competitive team that is missing its best player. The Hawks look decent even without Trey, so with Trey back, this team should be pretty solid. There's a sense of reliability here with Krejci, right? He isn't going to rest. He's not taking games off. He could play 36 minutes any given night, 38 minutes. He's done it before. Quinn Snyder goes to him kind of as a Swiss Army knife whenever someone is out to kind of take on a bigger role. So he's kind of that next man up that you love to see as someone who, you roster in a deep league. Just someone who is probably in that elite streamer category. Someone to consider grabbing a dynasty. He's young enough, and he has improved every year that he's played. Who's to say where he is from 2 years now? Maybe he's a starter on a decent team, right? So he started, if I'm not mistaken, I don't have it in front of me, but every game that he played in for the Hawks last year. So he's not foreign to that concept either. Pretty excited about Krejci's floor and the role he has now, especially when the Hawks get a little bit more healthy. And when players like Clay and Buddy are still over rostered despite not bringing the steals upside that he does, I think Krejci is a great guy to make that swap for. All right. And last guy I want to talk about today is Michael Porter Jr. He is a sell high. I don't think he's trending down, but he's definitely a massive, massive sell high. The Nets are bad, and we talked earlier about how much usage is available on this team right now. And Michael Porter Jr. is really taking all of the usage he can handle. Over the last 2 weeks, he's ranked 16th in 9-category ranking. For the season, he's ranked 30th, which is a lot better than he's been able to show in the past. It's directly tied to his increase in scoring and assists that we didn't know he had in him. He was always a punt assist guy, right? But with the Nets lacking any real creators and Cam Thomas still being injured, he's distributing now, right? You're seeing it with Nick Claxton too. The assists are coming from unlikely places. But kind of the core issue I have with Michael Porter Jr. is I don't think he has any late season viability, right? They're already sitting him on back-to-backs, and I think they'll continue to do that. I don't think he's a shutdown candidate, but availability is the best ability, right? Especially in fantasy playoffs. You want guys who are in your lineup 4 games instead of 2 or 3. And the Nets have multiple 4-game weeks during the fantasy playoffs. 2 out of those 3 weeks, and again, depending on when your playoffs are. But during those, I think that's 19, 20, and 21. 2 out of those 3 weeks, they have back-to-backs. He's likely sitting in each of those weeks, meaning you're losing value exactly when it matters most. If you can get a top 25, top 30 player right now by leveraging his kind of gaudy stat lines, you should, I think. And then some examples of guys who are likely to be available every night and will matter down the stretch. Mikal Bridges, I think, is a great trade target. Denny Avdia is probably someone who's a little bit ambitious, but maybe Denny cools off a little bit with some of the when Drew Holiday returns for Portland, and that's kind of when you pounce on Denny. Keontae George, I think, is a great one. Tyler Hero, KD, if KD didn't have the name value, I think he'd be a great target for Michael Porter Jr. just because, KD is on a good team, and it's possible he's playing those back-to-backs late down the stretch, right? He's got that awesome floor and the upside. Anyways, basically guys who are going to be in the lineup consistently, who their teams will prioritize, right? With Cam Thomas out and MPJ absorbing a ton of that extra usage, I think right now is the best time to cash in, right? I think his value may never be higher than this actual moment because when Cam Thomas returns, he's going to lose some of those shots. He's going to lose some of those assists, and you might have missed your window. He might kind of fall a little, or maybe not back to where he was in Denver, but just down a little bit more to where you won't be able to get the type of player in a trade that you could right now. So that'll do it this week, though. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope the next couple weeks are solid for you guys with the NBA Cup coming up. And, we're approaching the holidays, so I hope everyone is having a great holiday season if you celebrate. And with that, I will talk to you next time. Thanks. Bye.